Your Authentic Self is a podcast designed to guide you towards a deeper, more rewarding life by nurturing your emotional, mental, physical and spiritual well-being. We're thrilled to take you on this journey. Welcome to today's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Authentic Self, podcast that looks at authentic living, life, well-being, mental health and much more besides. So today I'm here with Lee and we're going to be looking at projection. So morning Lee, how are you?
Good morning. I'm not too bad this morning. It's good to be back and see you. Good chat and a good conversation.
Well, hopefully projection will be an interesting thing for us to kind of explore, unpick and for people to listen into. So as often is the tradition when we do these podcasts, shall we start off by thinking about what projection is?
Yeah. Well, we can simplify. As I said, we've talked just earlier. Projection is quite in depth and quite big, so we can't go into all details today, but we can start opening up a little bit. So obviously, I'll give a little bit of my stuff. You come in with your own stuff, Mark. So projection, fundamentally at start is just it can be having feelings, emotions, characteristics we find acceptable or difficult in ourselves, and then we can pass them on to someone else. And that can be in forms of blaming or judging. But it's that stuff that we find unacceptable in ourselves that we don't want to deal with. So it's much easier to blame and pass over. It's the other person's feelings, thoughts, or characteristics. It's not ours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of along the same lines as what I think, really. So, like, if someone's really struggling to kind of accept that they're angry about something, maybe they deem anger to be bad or worried about what people think about them if they are angry, so they'll disown their anger and then just see the anger in the other person. So effectively they'll say, like, well, you're just so angry all the time, or I don't like it when you're angry. And actually what's happening there potentially is the person's projecting their own anger that they don't like onto somebody else and seeing anger in them.
In many different forms and ways and guises, kind of just following on from what you're saying. Really, it can be even things that if someone's feeling really angry about a situation or they're not happy with it, but actually they don't want to admit that they're angry or not happy, but they'll say to the person, "You're just not happy about this situation. You just deal with it." But it's them that don't want to deal with it. It's them that's not happy about it. So it's just quite easier to blame the other person, or if they're. I think the one that people can recognize or talk about sometimes is if someone's getting blamed for being dishonest or having an affair in a relationship, but maybe it's the other person that's having an affair or being dishonest in what they're trying to do.
Blaming the other person.
Blame the other person. You're the one that's thinking of cheating or having an affair, but actually it may be something for them.
Good point. So I think you said it was something about we can project like characteristics, qualities, emotions, things that we don't like about ourselves. We can kind of like say, no, it's not me, it's you, and then like disown our own experience or feelings or whatever and see it in the other. And I guess it's worth saying it may or may not be there in the other person. They may or may not be angry.
No, I think that's the point. That's where we're trying to make. This is the person who's finding it difficult. It's more their stuff actually, and a lot of times it probably isn't going on for the other person. I've been in situations myself. Even in my personal life, and someone said those things, and it's actually, I don't think that you really want to do this now. Well, actually, I'm fine. I've got no sense of it, but that gives me some insight, and actually, well, maybe that they're not quite comfortable with this situation. So let's discuss that.
So in that example, you were thinking the other person was kind of projecting onto you, but actually they weren't really wanting to do the thing.
Yeah, because I knew that I was completely comfortable and actually
you're okay with it.
I was actually okay, and wasn't an issue or a difficulty. So I felt into that. I think actually no, quite calm, quite okay with it actually. And actually they're getting quite defensive or quite animated about it. So maybe this is something more for them, and we need to open up and discuss what it's about.
And then you said about like it gives you an insight into perhaps what's going on for them. So like with that awareness, you were able to kind of think, maybe they're not as comfortable doing this thing as I am.
Which is good to have that insight to do that.
Definitely,
because it can cause a obviously then a lot of disruption in the relationship, a lot of discord and breakdown in communication.
Yeah. And then what happens with that then? So like your insight says, okay, maybe this person's not as happy doing this thing as I am. Do you raise it with them? Do you kind of say, hang on, I'm wondering if you're not as happy with this as I am, or are you
yeah. So I wouldn't go back into blame and say, well, this is me, this is all about you. And
no, that wouldn't be helpful.
Me.
You're projecting as well.
Yeah. But no, I'd have a conversation. And I think first of all, it's about start with myself really and be more authentic with myself. Actually, I'm feeling like I'm just speaking to you about it. Really, is actually, I'm quite okay with it. I'm quite calm and relaxed, and I'm either way. But is it then just offer it back really? Is there anything that you're uncomfortable with, or you're not quite so happy with? Interesting to hear it.
The responding conversation.
Yeah, so more responding to the situation, and want to be more inclusive and collaborative. With it instead of me then going on the projection and on the defense and stuff we've talked about before, pitting on my armoring because I feel defensive, but it's actually staying open to my experience within it.
Yes, I love that because otherwise you just get into the. What do you mean? It's not me. It must be you. That's only going to antagonize, isn't it? It's going to wind up the other person, and.
Well, where they're already in a more their defense mechanism is already there.
Yeah, exactly.
Their armoring's already there because it's something they're feeling really uncomfortable with. So it would only fuel to the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you're having a full-on argument, and actually all it needed was that kind of open, curious. And I guess you probably knowing your phrase, what is it about the heart? Kind of keep your heart open.
Yeah. Well, I think that's Well, that's what it is. In that moment, start trying to be more aware of myself. So So going back to the phrase, so if my heart's closed, I keep my mouth closed.
Yes, that's it.
So I would try to, within that, just be more aware of myself. Am I feeling more open to myself in this situation? Is my heart open? Am I feeling compassionate towards myself? Because if I'm in that sort of space, I'm more likely to be more open and more compassionate to the person's space.
Yeah.
If I'm shut down, I'm just going to be dismissive myself and defended and armoring up, and you're just going to get into a two-way conversation of defensive mechanisms in place.
And it's not easy, is it? Because if someone's projecting onto us, naturally we might want to defend our position. We might want to kind of say, no, I'm not that, or I'm not feeling this way, or we could feel a bit insulted, couldn't we, or hurt or offended. And so then we might naturally want to respond defensively. But like you're saying, that's not necessarily going to be helpful, is it?
Well, my experience is not helpful.
No, I don't think it is helpful.
And that's another thing I can say to myself in those moments, actually, because I always look at the difference between responding, because people say, well, you can either respond negatively or respond positively, but I don't look at it that way. For me, that's still supportive and helpful for people, but I look at it two ways. It's I look at it as difference between reacting and responding. The reactiveness is more of getting defensive and going on attack and being more blaming and judgmental, but responding in the situation is much more supportive and compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can say to myself, no, hold on a minute, how do I want to do? Do I want to get reactive to this, or do I want to be more responsive? And I know the answer. Obviously, I'd like to be more responsive.
I thought it would be, yeah. Not the other one. You've done too much work on yourself to want to do.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll try.
Well done. So what we're talking about then is this kind of, because projection has many different facets to it, I think. But at the moment, what we're talking about is projection where we might disown something in ourselves and then see it in the other, and often we can then be quite upset by it. At the end of the day, if we've disowned something in ourselves, it's because we don't like it, or we deem it to be bad, or we're uncomfortable with it. So then when we see it, or imagine we're seeing it in somebody else, we're going to be upset by it, aren't we?
Well,
so like my example of angry, if I really don't like being angry and think it's really bad to be angry, and if I see it in somebody else, I'm not going to be okay with that.
No. And so two ways that I would have went there as well with it. It's like, as you said, and that gets deep rooted. Especially if we look at, we can get dropped down underneath that, because it may be a part of us growing up that it was not okay to be angry, etc. So actually, when we're feeling angry in that moment, for us, no, that's not acceptable. We can't be angry. We can't voice ourselves. So obviously we project over this, or you're angry, because it's easy to admit someone else can get angry than ourselves to get angry.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I just plucked anger as an example out of thin air, really. But there's so many things that we might experience that we could disown. Like being emotional, being sensitive. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know, being too something. Because this is likely what we would have been told in our early lives. Oh, you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're too angry. And so, of
yeah,
course, then we learn that it's not okay to be too anything. So we
yeah.
disown those things, don't we? And then we might unconsciously, of course, project them and see them in others. And in the other, it may or may not be there, but it's coming from our own disowned stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit like I said just now about being dishonest. If we got brought to say, no, you always tell the truth.
Mm,
You've always got to be honest. But in that moment that you may be feeling anxious to actually talk your truth in that moment,
mm,
that's not going to sit well with you,
no,
especially if you can't say it. So it'd be easy then to chuck it out to the person.
yeah.
You're just not being honest about this with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if I think it's worth kind of putting in here that this isn't about blaming ourselves or others for this phenomena, is it? Like there would have been a reason why we disowned something, wouldn't there? Like somebody told us it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to be sensitive, it's not okay to be emotional. So somewhere in our life story, we would have been told it's not okay. So we would have disowned the thing that we are potentially projecting onto somebody else. So I think it needs to be dealt with compassionately rather than judgmentally or with blame, because it's almost like there's a wounding, isn't there? There's a pain when people have disowned something, some characteristic or some part of themselves.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
painful
you're right
process.
there. I think that goes back to when we was talking just now about actually not getting defensive ourselves within that. If we feel that, well, actually, no, actually, I know that I've maybe been dishonest or I'm not angry. Actually, I am quite comfortable right now.
Mm,
So it's about what I was saying just now about not getting our own defenses off about that,
mm,
actually recognizing this is obviously something that's a wounding or there's something's going on for the other person that they're finding very difficult.
yeah, yeah,
So to stay more compassionate and open to that
yeah,
and maybe give them some support to give them space
yeah,
to work around it or how we can move forward with it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? Otherwise, it just gets into kind of like an argument or a fight or a war or something like that, and
Yeah,
that's not very helpful, is it?
no. Well, you're never going to sort the situation out then either. And
Very
actually,
unlikely.
it'll probably turn into something completely different from what the first difficulty was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's okay to be any of these things, isn't it? It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to be any of these things that we
Yeah,
might disown in ourselves. Okay, back in the day, somebody told us it's not okay or implied it, but it is, of course, okay, isn't it? It's just human behavior. It's human emotion.
yeah. And I think that's the place to start recognizing, isn't it? It's
Mm.
personally, it's okay to feel these things. It's
Yeah,
normal, it's
absolutely.
natural.
Yeah. So what we're seeing then is how we might disown parts of ourselves and see it in others, or imagine we're seeing it in others. And we've been using kind of more. I don't want to use the word negative, but it's hard sometimes to find another word that kind of gets the message across. But these things like anger or sensitivity, then they're not negative; they just are, aren't they? But we've been looking more at how it might happen in a less helpful way. But I think we can also flip the coin and think about how we might have like really positive qualities or attributes that we disown. Like our intelligence, our artistic ability, our compassion, our sensitivity, for example. We can kind of have these really, really good things about us as well that we disown.
Can
Um,
you give
and
an example of that?
yeah. So, like, I'm thinking if someone's like, I don't know. I'm thinking to like at school. I don't know if it was like this for you, but anybody who was quite intelligent or quite clever kind of got bullied for being clever.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember stuff like that going on. There was always like the SWAT or the nerd, or these really horrible labels were applied to somebody who was just quite
yeah,
gifted, academically. So I'm thinking for somebody like that, they might want to disown their intelligence. They might want to play it down. They might want to kind of, oh, no, not really. And so what can happen then is that we see the intelligence in somebody else. So we might find ourselves saying, oh, you're so clever, or you're so gifted, or you're so talented in a particular area. And maybe sometimes, and I'm not saying the other person wouldn't be, but it's always worth checking, well, how am I with accepting my intelligence or my ability too? So if I am complimenting somebody else, I'm complimenting them for their ability, but I'm also recognizing mine, as opposed to disowning my intelligence and seeing it only in the other. Yeah. So,
And the difficulty with that is if you're not aware of it and you're not owning it and you're not forthcoming with it, actually, you know, you're actually suppressing yourself in that moment too. You're not putting yourself forward or giving yourself opportunities to
yeah,
grow,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, absolutely.
within that as well.
Yeah,
And I think in terms of that is if like in the work environment, you know, and you feel, well, you know, you've got the attributes or the intelligence or the characteristics to do this, but actually, oh no, I don't want to put myself forward because of those past experience of then, you know, being shut down around those characteristics and attributes.
yeah,
So
yeah,
then you start stunting your growth, you
yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it could be other areas. I'm just giving the workplace one, but it could be in a number of situations.
Yeah, it could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So it could. So I think there's two sides to the coin there with projection in terms of what we might disown in ourselves. We might disown things like anger, but we also could disown things like our intelligence or our creativity.
Yeah. Because messages could have been, don't be arrogant, don't.
Yeah,
Can't not just be that you got put down as, oh, you're a nerd, you're a brain box, and you know, it could
yeah,
just be, oh, you're arrogant, or you feel
yeah.
yourself.
And know
So
it all.
yes, over time, then you just suppress that down a little bit.
Yeah,
You know, it's not
yeah.
positive.
Yeah, it's possible, isn't it? So like we're not saying that all of these things are disowned, but it's worth just running it through a little filter, isn't it? It's like, okay, so I'm going to compliment this person. How am I with owning my intelligence? Or I'm going to say this person's really angry. How am I with my anger? Just by way of checking out, actually, is this projection or is this actually that I'm seeing somebody intelligent or seeing somebody who's genuinely angry?
Yeah. It's just that inquiry, isn't it, as well? Inquiry to self, inquiry to other.
Yeah,
And I think that was getting back when I said about the communication just now. It's about that. Remember to the inclusivity.
yeah,
The inclusivity about just not getting caught in our stuff or just not getting caught in the other person's stuff.
yeah.
It's that inquiry into, well, you know, this is coming up for me. How is it for you?
Yeah,
Because I'm getting this sense. Is that your sense or is it not?
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and people are less likely to be more defensive then because it's not just about either blaming, just getting caught in self.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's just giving the opportunity because the other person then will feel more heard and listened to and have a space to do that.
Absolutely. It's your open-heartedness, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
hard to be upset with someone who's open-hearted.
Yeah.
And if they are, they're projecting. I would say highly likely to be projecting.
Yeah. There's two good things of communicating that way. One is, as how I just said it, actually, if you're being inclusive and you're in inquiry with the other person, they're going to feel heard, listened to, and there's importance within this. But also when our heart is open and we're being more inclusive, they can also feel that energy.
Like of course, yeah.
They're going to feel the more warmth in openness, energy that's coming out of us, just like they're going to feel the energy if we're shut down and the armor comes off and the defensiveness comes off and the volatility, whatever words you want to use, they're going to feel that too. So more likely respond or react whichever way you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. so kind of like any conversation that begins with "It's not me, it's you."
Yeah.
Or what do you mean I'm like that? What about you? Anything that begins like that is not open-hearted and open and curious, is it? It's kind of
I think you've hit it on the nutshell there. It's that is what projection is, isn't it? It's not me, it's you.
Yeah. That's a projection, isn't it?
That is projection in a nutshell. It's not me, it's you, but actually, really, it is us.
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's several facets to this, as I said. So there's also it's worth us looking at, I think, at how in situations and relationships, projection, I think, has the power to escalate things to, and I don't use this phrase lightly, but to war. And I think if people had a full understanding of projection and the implications of it, we might be able to avoid a lot of fights, conflicts, and wars. Because if you think about it, the projected idea that I'm right or good and you're bad and not okay, that's at the source of a lot of conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
So might I be projecting my idea of what is right and good onto the other, and therefore they're not? Do you see what I mean? So we can project like a belief, we can project a way of life, we can project an understanding or previous experiences. I see this in my work a lot in relationships where, somebody was brought up in a particular way, during their childhood, and the partner was brought up in a very different way. So partner A kind of thinks that they were brought up in the right way and projects that onto partner B. Well, partner B thinks they were brought up in the right way and projects that onto partner A. And what you've got is chaos around how to bring the kids up, or what you should be watching on TV, or what you should be having for dinner. Do
Yeah.
you see what I mean? And it's just a projection of a way of life, or a projection of ideas of what's right, as opposed to, like we're saying, the open, curious. It's like, okay, where does this passion for this come from? Ah, okay, that was your childhood experience.
Yeah, and that's where it will come from, the child experiences,
Yeah, yeah,
etc.
yeah.
But you're right there. It's getting caught up in our own ideologies of how things should be, and that's what we should think, that's the way it should be. That's when it's going to
Yeah,
be. And I think, just going from what you're saying, I think that's how it plays out. We can go to, you're talking about war, but we can go down just to dynamics within our personal relationship, be it
yeah,
our partner, our children, our work colleagues. But if that's the way that we're, dealing with our internal world outwardly on projection, that can manifest all the way up. But you're saying it even to governments and people in power. It's that's the way that we see and deal with things.
Yeah, I think it does. Like, if you think of the heated anger that could be, present in an argument around, what happens at meal times with the kids in a relationship. You think of the intensity of the power of an argument over that, and then escalate that to, like, like you're saying, governments, world powers. I mean, it just goes on to another level, doesn't it?
To keep it more to a lower level, to extend from war, to just go back into the family dynamic. It just reminds me of a situation I've heard people talk about this a lot of times, because you mentioned around meal times, like some people found it okay to eat their meal in the living room watching some TV on a train, and they'd be, well, no, when I grew up, we had to eat it at the kitchen table, the dining table, with no TV, etc. So you get caught up until, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. That's when the dynamic
And so there, each person is projecting their idea of what's right onto the other and making the other wrong. Whereas actually, there is no right or wrong with it, is there? It's just like, preferences, experiences. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter if you have your dinner in the living room or at the table? I mean, of course, there's social etiquette and stuff like that to think about. But in the grand scheme of things, no one was probably ever harmed, were they, by...
And I think that brings it all the way back to what I was saying just now about keeping things inclusive and and an artedness to it. Because okay, so you feel, I know this is a bit of a thing, we're going back to the mealtime, but it's like, well, so you feel that we've got to eat at the kitchen every time. I think it's okay to eat in the living room watching the TV, but then it's about just having some acceptance of the other person, and where they're coming from. Okay, so we both feel strongly, and this is difficulty, but then how do we come to some sort of resolution?
Absolutely.
And some compromise around it, but it's a collaborative compromise where we're both comfortable and happy, and that's the best. And that can go all the way up, as we said, even from family dynamic. I know it's very easy to talk about this and very practical, because it's a lot of work that have to go into this, but it's manageable even down from that family dynamic all the way up to some power struggle within government or wherever in, it could be businesses, even to governments, and to full out war. If people could this way, it'd be much more manageable.
So we could kind of like identify the potential for projection, couldn't we? It's like, hang on a minute, I'm getting really upset about this. I'm getting really upset about my partner suggesting the kids can have their dinner in front of the TV. I'm getting really upset about this. What's this about? And kind of, like being curious about where the reaction in ourselves comes from. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, I remember Mum always said you must have your meal at the table. Right. Okay. Yes. And then just talking to the partner, being open. It's like, what went on for you when you were a kid? What did you have, around meal times? What rules were in your family? The partner might say, well, sometimes we'd have it at the table if it was Sunday lunch, but the rest of the time we had it in front of the TV watching Emmerdale or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, so we just had very different upbringings, and then maybe the couple would find a compromise. It doesn't have to be I'm right, you're wrong, does it? Projecting my rightness onto you. It could be, well, what should we do with our kids then? What kind of rules do we want in our house, in our family?
And then you can just open it up in the conversation of what's the, okay, so what's the benefits of eating it at the kitchen table, and what's the benefits of eating in the living room? and then you just come up to good conversations. But what's one thing that's which is good for people's growth and development and become more authentic within this, it just comes to then, like when you was talking about looking at that belief system, but then starting to have a flexibility around it. But the word I like to use really is creativity. I've actually, but that's just a nulling it down to a word for what you've just explained, really. Just actually, how can I be flexible? How can I be creative around? How can I look at this a little bit differently?
Right.
And how can I shift and move and change so, you know, if this is beneficial or feels okay for me and everybody else.
So it sounds like for you, the creativity and the compromise kind of go together. It's like using creativity to compromise, find some middle ground. And
and you can use creativity for any, and we're going to stick to this to projection, but having creativity in all forms of your life, of any rigidity that you've got, be that with how you deal with your thoughts, your feelings, or your behaviors, anything. Start to look, and especially if they're more harming to yourself or the relationships. Creativity to be able to shift and change.
Absolutely.
If there's no
podcasting,
isn't there? Well, there you go.
There's another one.
Creativity, there can be no change because you'll just stay exactly the same.
That's true. Yes, just almost like a profound statement. That, like, what is it? Without creativity, there's no change.
There'll be no change.
It's true.
If you're not willing to be creative and flexible, you'll just stay rigid and stay in one space. So you need creativity to promote.
I like that.
Growth and change.
So like being creative, being open to creating new possibilities, new ways of doing things, new ways of communicating. So that is creation, isn't it? Creativity.
Thinking, feeling, and behaving. You know.
That's good. I like that. So I think how this might manifest for people in their lives generally will be around relationships. When like we've just been talking about this example of projecting ideas around what happens with meal times, onto partners and stuff. So we've kind of wandered into the territory of relationships. But I don't know whether you see this in your work and experience too, but quite often when I'm working with people who are experiencing relational difficulties, it's very, very often because they've projected an idea of what a relationship should be like onto the partner. And I find that Disney's got a lot to answer for with this. Because we're all brought up with those kind of like Disney stories, aren't we? Those kind of romantic tales, fairy tales, all of this kind of fantasy stuff we're all brought up with. And I think then that can get, and of course through teenage times, and all of that can get projected onto what a relationship and partner should be like.
Well, we know Disney, it's you meet someone and you live happily ever afterwards, but actually what people need to realize is relationships are very difficult. And actually, the way I explain it, if you want a relationship where there's a relationship brings both pleasure and pain, because there's going to be pleasurable moments in a relationship, but there's going to be painful moments in a relationship because you're both completely different. You can't be identical. So even if it's going to bring up some disappointment that one person wants to do something one day and the other person wants to do something else, it's going to bring up some sort of vulnerability. The only way, but if you want a truly bonded or connected relationship, it needs to be it's going to bring up some painful moments. If there's no painful or discomfort in your relationship, it just stays superficial, or stays surface level. So actually, if you want a truly bonded and connected relationship, you need to go below that, which can bring up some vulnerability.
Absolutely, it needs to go below the projection, doesn't it? Because it's so easy and almost like automatic, isn't it, to kind of respond or react to a partner or any, it could be a workmate, it could be anybody, but we're talking about romantic relationships, aren't we? But it'd be so easy just to kind of project stuff. It's like, you're not meeting my needs, you're not like a partner's supposed to be, you're not meeting the fantasy of the relationship I have. So easy to respond like that. But of course we're holding that fantasy unconsciously, aren't we? Nobody, kind of meets a partner and says, oh, this is going to be like Disney, or this is going to be, it's unconscious, that, isn't it? But I think if people do, like you're saying, look more deeply, they'll find some kind of fantasy of what a relationship's supposed to be. And then the partner's not meeting that fantasy, and then they get upset.
Well, that's when that's where the projection and blame comes from, actually, because what their belief system is, like if we go back to Disney again, you meet someone and then they fulfill all my needs and we live happily ever afterwards. All relationships going to bring some difficulty at some point. So if those difficulties are bringing up some sadness or some rejection or whatever that vulnerability is, well, hold on a minute, the other person's making me feel like this. Well, actually, it isn't the other person. This is actually stuff that's going on from you or for you, so but you blame and project out.
Yeah. Because actually what's happening there is that the reality isn't matching the fantasy.
That's correct.
And that isn't the partner's fault.
No.
That's almost like, I don't know what's fault. Disney's fault. I don't know what, that's probably projecting, but do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not the partner's fault that they are not living up to the unconscious fantasy that you're projecting onto them, is it?
No, that's right. And I think it gets closely into the realm of expectation stuff as well. That, you expect a partner to be a certain way, but there's the saying, isn't it? If you live your life through just a world of expectation, you're going to have a lot of disappointment because no one can live up to your fantasy,
absolutely,
your expectation fully. And remember, we're all complex human beings with all our own stuff, and we can't be there 24/7 for somebody all the time.
No,
it doesn't mean the other person doesn't care. It just means that in that moment they can.
But they're a real human.
Yeah, and they're human and we're human, but it's quite easy then to project and blame the other person for not fulfilling what we want.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you're right, because with expectations, because we can project expectations.
Yeah.
Can't we? The expectations be like this, whatever this is, and then they're not, because they're human, not fantasy. And again, we're into dodgy territory in relationships, because then there can be arguments and upset and fallout and divorces, and
that's it. And that's it. If you can get your sense of, well, actually, this was my projection or this was my expectation that led to this moment. That's going to be more beneficial to get more recognizing, more of an understanding of this is actually starting with me, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a massive subject, this, isn't it? Projection.
It is. You can go out.
You could go on for weeks, couldn't we? But I'm thinking of projection. I always think of it like this: it's like a diamond. There's so many different facets, and you look at it from a different angle, there's something else in it. I think projection's very multifaceted. So we've been talking really about how it might kind of manifest in terms of stuff that we've disowned in ourselves, or how it might be problematic in relationships, and now kind of thinking more about what the fantasies might be that we're projecting. And so these are just some of the facets of it, aren't they? That
like you said, just some of the facets, because we could go into more realms of where does this start, where did it manifest, and go into all the childhood stuff. But I said we can only talk about a certain amount, and give people snippets of what it is, and if and get more intrigued and interested to delve deeper for themselves as well.
Absolutely. Well, thinking of facets, another facet that occurs to me with projection is, I'm sure you've come across this as well. It's like, as therapists, we might often find ourselves saying to people like, if you talk to so and so about that, if you talk to your partner about this, if you talk to your manager about this, we kind of, I guess we're kind of a bit more trained to kind of look out for projection, aren't we? And then we might say, if you talk to somebody about what you're feeling. And I don't know whether you've had this, but many, many times I have then, there's no point because I know what they're thinking. Or there's no point because I know what they're going to say. Yeah. Or there's no point because they're not interested. So in that facet, they're projecting, almost like they're projecting that they already know the outcome before actually allowing the opportunity to have a discussion.
I think that's where the expectation comes, because that's things that you're saying, or they should know how I'm feeling, or they should know what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. That's again a projected expectation.
Another projection expectation.
Why should or how could the other know what we're thinking, needing, wanting? It's really hard, isn't it? Unless they're a mind reader.
But that's the thing to as well, what you're saying as well, when we talk to people, that is asking questions like you're saying, well, actually you talk to your partner and try to open this out and have the inclusive conversation, but it's also getting deeper in the moment for them, actually saying, well, actually, how were you feeling in that moment? And that can give them some more realization. Well, actually, I know we're going back to anger, but well, actually, I was very angry about it.
Yeah.
And they actually show them that internally what was really going on. Actually, well, actually, I didn't quite say this.
Yeah.
When they might have been saying, well, you're not telling me everything. So some more insight and start delving deeper into seeing some of the projections as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's I think really interesting and really important that we consider that, don't we? How we might not know what the other person's thinking.
Well, yeah, it just goes back with the thing is we're not mind readers.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
Just remember keeping that in mind where they're not mind readers.
no,
You know,
absolutely not.
it doesn't matter how well we know someone, we can't in that moment really get a sense of what they're feeling. We might have an idea,
Yes.
but we don't know. And if we don't know, we're just assuming and we could get it wrong.
Indeed. Yeah.
You know,
And it's being open to being wrong, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Because, I wrote something about needing to be right on my Facebook page recently, and kind of saying, we want to be right, don't we? Nobody wants to be wrong. So it's like then we project our rightness and make the other wrong rather than being open to like, well, I might be wrong actually. Tell me, did I get that wrong?
But that could be another podcast all about because people can get very caught in righteousness,
Yeah.
which is driven from expectations and
Yeah.
projections, etc. But there's one saying that is sometimes that I've said to myself over the years as well about righteousness or being right is it better to be right or is it better to do the right thing?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. So,
We need a podcast of Lee's wisdom.
wow. And yourself, but yeah, all these little things that we both got, which we could write a little book about it, couldn't we? Or little memos. But
Good, yeah.
but I found that pretty good one because these little sayings that we both got as well actually gets us more connected with ourselves as well in those moments we defend it. Because I know even for myself when I can say that in the past, is it better to be right here or is it better to do the right thing?
Yeah.
That can be quite touching within yourself. That can be just these little sayings can then actually make you have a pause, make you have a breath. And we talk about the heart here and actually allow that heart to be a bit more open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which in that turn you're starting to be more compassionate for well, I'm talking myself on it, can be more compassionate to myself in that moment. Is it better to be right? Or is it better to think, I want to do the right thing here because I care. So I'm being more compassionate to myself in that moment. And if I'm more compassionate myself in that moment, I'm more likely to do that externally.
Yeah. Wow. Little phrase came to me while you were saying that, Lee. It's projection prevents connection.
See, there you go. So
there's one of my
another wise one.
Yeah, I've got one too. Because it does, doesn't it? While I'm busy saying there's no point talking to somebody about it because I know exactly what they're thinking or how they're going to respond. I'm not connecting with that person, am I? I'm just imagining this fantasy experience that may or may not be accurate. The only way to really have connection with someone is to kind of take that kind of curiosity and say, look, I've got this fantasy, can I check it out with you? Or I'm imagining you're thinking this, am I right? Or, do you actually have that connection with somebody?
I'm still letting that one land. I think that's a good one. I think I have to remember that projection. We'll say it again, Mark. Say it again.
So projection prevents connection.
Connection. Yeah. That's a beautiful one because as what we said before and other times that we've talked about, that's what everybody really wants.
Yeah. I think so.
And all our, our complexities and sometimes doesn't allow us that connection, but innately that's what we want.
Yeah, I think so.
With others, so that's a beautiful one.
But we're hardwired for it, aren't we? We're hardwired for connection with other human beings. So projection kind of sabotages that.
Yeah, I like that one. It's still resonating with me now. Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay, yeah. Maybe do a podcast on that as well. When we do these podcasts, there's always more themes for more podcasts, isn't there? So plenty of topics to think about in the future, haven't we?
Yeah. So I suppose we can start looking at, okay, so how can we start to maybe start stopping the projection or looking at it or stuff. So how can we do that?
How do we start stopping it?
How do we start stopping it?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I mean, my mantra that I've used for years is awareness equals choice equals change.
Yeah.
That, I guess for me is how I might begin stopping it.
Yeah, which is another great mantra. But yeah, so I think the awareness is definitely, you need awareness. I think that's something that I wrote down as well. It's recognizing it. Well, recognizing it is the awareness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you recognize and you're aware of it, like you say, then you have a choice in that moment. Hold on, I'm aware that I'm projecting here. I'm aware I've got an expectation, whatever.
Yeah.
If I'm aware of it, I've got a choice. I can carry on with this projection, or I can actually stop and
Yeah.
be creative,
Yeah.
flexible, and do something else around it,
Do something different. Yeah.
which will bring change within yourself and in your
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly. Yeah.
You know, which, and I suppose another thing. So you've got to get more of so it's gaining more of a clear identity of self. You know, I think that's what the awareness is really, isn't it? Getting more of a
That
clear,
sounds complicated. So was it a clearer?
you're just getting a more clear identity of yourself. Because if you've got a more clear identity of yourself and
Yeah.
what's going on for you in that moment, you're less likely to project on, because what the projection is that you're saying it's the other person's
Yeah.
stuff, it's the other person's character, it's the other person's identity, what's going on.
Right.
If
Okay.
you've got a clearer, it goes back to the awareness really. If you've got to recognize an awareness
Yeah.
of your own identity in this situation,
Yeah.
you know, you're more likely to have better choices then.
Well, I'm in danger of
This
projecting.
is your stuff, not their stuff.
Indeed. I'm in danger of projecting right now, because I'm projecting that I know what you mean by that. So let me just check it out. So I think you're meaning basically develop self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness. Yeah, yeah.
So that was right.
That's it. Really, it's just another way of saying, yeah, you know, having a clearer self-identity, having a clearer self-awareness.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I just felt myself under pressure to develop my self-identity. I'm thinking, hang on a minute. No, I think Lee means so. But that was a projection, wasn't it? Because I was projecting that I knew what you meant.
Yeah. It's just another way of saying
a
it.
live example there.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think with the self-awareness, so, you know, like if I'm finding myself having a very strong reaction to somebody I've just literally met like 30 seconds ago, it's like, where's that coming from? You know, maybe this person's reminding me of somebody from the past, or maybe they look similar, or there's a mannerism or an accent or something that's triggering something, and I'm projecting somebody from my past onto the here and now person. So the awareness of, I'm really reacting strongly to this person, might this be projection?
Yeah.
That's good, isn't it? But you need the self-awareness for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and then you're separating it. Then you separate each other in that moment.
Yeah.
Separate, not from connection, but separate.
No, but I'm separating the here and now person from the there and then person, and then I might be able to be creative, mightn't I? Say, okay, so maybe this person's reminding me of somebody from the past, and this isn't the person from the past. So what could I do differently? Or maybe I could just go up and say, hello, how are you? You know, create connection. But if I'm experiencing the here and now person as if they were somebody from the past I didn't like or had a bad experience with, then I'm not going to be able to connect with them, am I? So the awareness is vital in that. Yeah, to the awareness led to change.
Yeah, and I think within that, having that self-awareness, etc., within that, all these other little things that we've been talking about, facets, the word for this podcast, that's coming up a lot.
Isn't it?
Yeah, but the facet in that for me is stuff that we're talking about as well. As soon as we get some self-awareness within that and what's happening and where it may be coming from, or how we might be thinking or feeling, we can give ourselves a little bit more self-compassion in that moment.
Yeah.
Which can internally settle us, which can then make our communication and better with the other person. Because if you can own that, then actually, I'm aware this is going on for me right now.
Yeah.
And then get into that inclusive conversation. This is going on for me.
Yeah.
You know, what's going on for you?
Yeah.
Then, okay, so then how do we collaboratively work to compromise to make this situation a little bit better for both of us? And that keeps the inclusivity.
Absolutely. And that's the opposite then, isn't it? You know, like projection. I forgot my mantra. What was it? Projection prevents connection. But what you're saying is the opposite. So if you take projection out the way, then connection is possible.
Well, it's the same thing, really, isn't it? You know, if
you
put projection, you're going to get more connection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's the thing. You need to connect with self first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get
and that self-awareness to know. Definitely. There's a little technique that I've taught counselling students for years, and I just call it the I am exercise. So I'm thinking people listening to this might actually have a little play with this. So it's like, if I notice myself having a bit of a rant, because do you know what? Sometimes I might, you know, I'm only human. I might find myself reacting to somebody or something in a kind of, you know, angry way. So maybe in my mind I'm ranting on about something. It's like I can pause and think, no, hang on a minute. Let me just put I am in front of all this. So I don't know, something that generally might wind me up is you know, somebody pulling in front of me in the car or something. You know, I think that kind of winds me up, and then I can find myself in my mind kind of think, oh, you know, what a unpleasant so and so, and you know, how impatient, and you know, couldn't they wait for it? And then it's like, no, if I say I am impatient,
Yeah,
And excuse me, hang on a minute, that kind of touches me. Do you know what I mean? Or, I am in a rush, or I am inconsiderate. It really brings it home, doesn't it? And it kind of brings the projection back to me and gives me an opportunity to kind of see how I am. How am I with my own impatience, my own busyness, my own, pushing in. So the I am filter, I think, is a really good way of bringing the projection back to self.
definitely. I think that as soon as you got that awareness, I think alongside the awareness
Mm,
is having that only that, well, I'll use the word responsibility. Some people like the word accountability, but I like responsibility. So with that
mm,
awareness, then like you're saying, it's bring it back to responsibility.
yeah, yeah,
This is going on for me. This is how I am. This is,
yeah,
I think that's great within communication as well. With when we're communicating difficult stuff with, we're talking public, we can do this with children, our friends, our work colleagues,
yeah, yeah,
our partners. I find it always best to say that, like you were saying, I am feeling sad right now. I'm sad because
yeah.
if you own it, I'm feeling sad because what people can get into the pattern sometimes of you're making me feel
Oh,
sad.
yes, yeah,
It's more of an attack, and that person's more likely to get defensive. But it's about if you can take ownership, be aware with the awareness, bring some more ownership,
yeah,
responsibility, and just you
yeah,
know, like you're
yeah,
saying. I know we have the call about I'm impatient, but just in the relationship,
yeah,
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 I'm feeling really sad right now.
yeah,
I'm feeling really disappointed right now. It's
yeah,
taking away the blame aspect and just
yeah,
this is just what's happened for me.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Removing the blame is so vital, isn't it, in terms of
Yeah,
connection to, well, to ourselves and to others, I guess.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
I do that myself. I'll just just own it. I'm feeling sad right now. This is my stuff.
Mm,
I know this is my stuff. So it's just taking
yeah,
that complete ownership. This is my stuff. This is going on for
yeah,
me. This is how I'm just feeling right now.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah,
I'm so glad you mentioned that phrase, you are making me feel, or they make me feel, it, and some people listening to this might find it really hard to believe, but I don't think anybody can make us feel anything.
no,
I mean, I'm not talking if you're walking down the street and someone, slaps you around the face. Of course, they made you feel physical pain, but we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about kind of emotional pain here. So I think that really anybody who upsets us in the moment, it's likely, I think, very likely to be a reminder of something that happened in the past.
yeah. In a good way that I've explained this to people before. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, as well, because people do find that hard to say, well, no, because if they didn't do this and this, I
Yeah.
don't like this and this. So I said, I'm not denying that their behavior may have an
Yes.
impact.
Yeah.
It has an impact, but not
Yeah.
directly made you feel it. Because
No.
if I can give an example of that, let's just say that you know, um, back at my child, if I let's say me and you in the room, Mark, just for an example, and
Yeah.
my stuff was I don't like I was never listened to as a child. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was never listened to as a child, but you didn't experience. Let's just say you didn't experience that.
Yeah.
If me and you were in a room and someone come into the room and we were talking to them and they wouldn't really give us any eye contact, they were messing around with a bit of paper,
Yeah.
etc. And I said, "Sorry, what did you say?" Because my past experiences would bring it up, then I didn't feel listened to. I could start feeling a little bit annoyed or irritated
Yeah. Yeah.
about that or angry or
Yeah.
whatever. But once again, yeah, but you may not feel anything because you didn't
No.
have that experience and you just it
Yeah.
didn't bother you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good way to explain it because it's still my stuff.
Yeah.
That person's behavior, even if it's inappropriate or it wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That
Oh, absolutely.
actually they didn't make me feel that because if I didn't have past experiences, what they were
Mm.
doing would not have affected me
Yeah.
like it was an affecting you in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
Absolutely.
clear? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really clear.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, it reminded me of a projection in the COVID time when there were lockdowns and um, growing up. Listeners to the podcast will have remembered we talked a bit before about our childhoods and stuff. So growing up for me was really difficult, and there was quite a lot of violence, and it was all quite extreme. And my stepfather would kind of lock the door of the house and prevent us from leaving it really while he kind of did think I don't want to get too deep because I don't want people to be triggered. But what he did when the door was locked at night was not pleasant. And so when the COVID lockdowns happened and Boris Johnson was kind of locking us in our houses, the projection for me on that was huge. So Boris stopped being Boris and he became my stepdad, locking me in my home, preventing me from leaving for considerable periods of time. And that was really, really difficult. So in that moment, Boris Johnson wasn't Boris Johnson. He was actually my stepfather through the projection. So I had to kind of like keep continually through that time, bring that projection back and say, no, actually, this isn't stepfather. This is Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, to really separate that out. So yeah, it's a really personal example of how that can happen. But Boris Johnson wasn't necessarily making me feel that. Actually, that original wounding came from way back then when my stepfather was doing it. Boris was reminding me of that wound.
That's right.
Yeah. So he wasn't making me feel that. That wound happened many, many years before Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. So I just wanted to share that because it's just like, the person in the here and now, we experience them as if they were the person from the past, or we experience the situation as if it was the situation from the past, and of course it isn't, is it? So whatever I thought about Boris Johnson might be, he didn't make me feel that.
No. It's great you brought that in for another example to recognise and get that. It's hard sometimes when people think, well, no, if someone wasn't doing this, I wouldn't feel this way, but it's not always the case.
The feelings were there long before we met the person, reminding us of the wound in the here and now, I think. Yeah. So again, it's owning that projection, isn't it? Bringing it back to home and not blaming, because then it just becomes futile and it's painful. The energy involved in blaming someone for something is really painful for us, isn't it? Probably more painful for the blamer than the blamee, if you think about it. The blamee may not. Boris never met me, as he doesn't know I exist, so he wasn't troubled by my ranting.
And this is what we get. I know this is other podcast we get on resentment, another podcast we could probably get onto, but just reiterate what you're saying there. Now, when we get resentful or blaming or angry or annoyed, it doesn't feel great.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not nice, is it?
No, I don't know. It's just it's very stressful, and
it is.
It just doesn't feel good whatsoever. So it's
So there's not much joy or benefit in blame, is there?
No. That's what we're
coming to. So I guess we're coming to the end of this podcast, then, aren't we? Is there anything you want to add before we conclude our discussion on projection?
No, I think we've as you said, we could go into other areas of it, but I think it feels quite full of some aspects that we brought in. But it's just coming back from your little saying or little quote that you said back then. It's like, thinking about projection, if you're projecting, you're stopping connection. I know you said it a bit better, so maybe you want to say it again, but
well, projection prevents connection was my snippet.
So projection prevents connection.
Not easy to say.
Which is true, which is a nice quote, but it's also factual.
I think it is.
So no, I think I'd like to leave it on that one, because I
think we've shared enough for now, and maybe we'll come back to it in the future. But for now, that feels like a good place to end. Thanks, Lee. See you all on the next podcast. And do remember to hit the subscribe or like button. So many people who watch or listen to the podcast do so, and we're really grateful for that. But it'd be really good if you could also like and subscribe to it, because it means that we can reach more people. And do please let your friends and family know about the podcast too, so we can spread the word as far as we can. Thanks, and see you next time. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. If anything you have heard has resonated with you, you would like to explore more, or have found difficult, you can get in touch with us. Our details are in the show notes below, along with some other useful links.